Well, it's time now for our press review, and for that I'm joined on set by Erin Ogunke. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Axie.
Erin, you're starting with our top story today, a very difficult story, another mass shooting at a primary school in the United States. What does the local press have to say today?
Well, ink is flowing, as you can imagine, about this, Haxie. I'll start with the Houston Chronicle, who hits back at comments from Republican Governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, saying, "Never again," he said, "that the killing of the 19 children and 2 adults is incomprehensible. Don't fall for it, Texans," says the paper in response. They say this is just as much cowardice as it is a bold-faced lie. And why? Well, because of access to guns. Texas has the most registered weapons in the United States, 1 million. That surpasses the second and third place Florida and Virginia combined. So the article implores readers, go vote, go fight. They say those are the only words that you need. I want to look at the editorial board of the Fort Worth Star Telegram, because they're parroting a new argument that I feel like mostly Republicans have been using in the wake of recent mass shootings. And that's that mental illness has kids killing kids, according to this Fort Worth Star Telegram article. The conservative paper says that they're essentially arguing that more youths than ever feel disconnected, they're angry, they're hopeless, and they suggest that it's this isolation and the loss of meaningful social connections that's leading to a rise in mental illness, and that's the pressing problem.
And some papers today are very much trying to understand the motivations, the specific motivations of this shooter. Do we know any more at this point?
Well, this topic, too, Haxie, has echoes of prior mass killings in the United States, unfortunately. The Washington Post published a piece quoting people who knew the 18-year-old gunman. They say he was bullied for his speech impediments, that he had difficulties at home with a mother who used drugs, and a pattern of acting out. They describe a person who indeed became increasingly isolated and dark, even self-mutilating because of bullying. It's worth mentioning that he shot and wounded his grandmother just before going on the rampage at the school. One person says that they couldn't believe that he did this. They end with, he needed help, he needed closure with his family and love.
A lot of anger today in the press directed at Republicans. Why is that, Erin?
Well, Texas Republicans in particular, Haxie, and that's because, as the Texas Tribune points out, in the past several years, lawmakers have eased gun laws, for example, by passing a permitless carry bill just last year. Now, this all comes after several mass shootings within Texas alone in the past couple of years: El Paso, Odessa, and Midland, to name just 3 major ones. There, of course, are many others. Though after some of those killings, the Republicans had initially signaled some openness to easing, to adding restrictions. They ended up backing down after other Republican officials and gun rights activists resisted. Instead, they passed laws that focused, again, on this question of mental health, on increasing mental health resources, and even giving teachers more access to guns, which is something we're hearing more and more in the wake of this shooting, that if teachers are armed, that'll prevent these types of incidents. I'd also like to show a cartoon that I think illustrates anger about Republicans and their contradictory values. There it is. So they claim to be pro-life when it comes to abortion. You can see that small light over abortion there. But for the rest, it's guns, 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 guns. You wonder where that pro-life stance is when it comes to guns, Haxie.
And Erin, this event is tragically similar to another mass shooting targeting school children almost 10 years ago, Sandy Hook.
Yeah, what NBC News describes as one of the defining tragedies of the early 21st century. In December of 2012, as a reminder, a 20-year-old gunman this time shot and killed 20 children and 6 adults at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newton, Connecticut. Now, this piece quotes the father of a girl who died in a different shooting, the Parkland shooting in Florida several years ago. He empathizes with parents who now have to think about how they'll plan a funeral, what casket to order, and all of this because they simply sent their children to school. And this isn't an exception. As an article by NPR reminds us, 27 school shootings with at least 4 injuries or deaths have taken place in the United States this year alone, while 119 such incidents, just at schools, have taken place since 2018.
And how are papers today speaking about the US gun lobby?
It's yet another major problem, Haxie. It's a barrier to reform, really. Joe Biden implored lawmakers to stand up to lobbies on Tuesday, illustrating that sticking point. Now, The Atlantic in this piece says that America's hands are full of blood. They quote a former gun industry executive who says that, sadly enough, mass shootings are actually good for the gun business in the United States. It's because people think the government will pass reforms, so they rush out to buy more guns. It says that most Americans appear to be appalled appalled. They claim to be appalled, but clearly not enough to cast votes to halt the killings. It's to the contrary, things are really getting worse. As one example, the Supreme Court next week will deliver a case in an opinion that could see the end of concealed carry bans in the few states where they remain. That's just one example of how the United States is moving in the wrong direction again in terms of laws and court cases dealing with gun access.
And a lot of sense in papers today in the US that when it comes to guns, Americans might just be their own worst enemies.
Yeah, I found a really striking piece from the Los Angeles Times to finish, Haxie. They go so far as to describe this as a national suicide. The paper quotes Abraham Lincoln in his earliest known address, stating that the U.S. could never be brought down by a foreign enemy. If destruction be our lot, he said, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must either live through it all or die by suicide. It says that the nation had its first brush with essentially self-suicide in the Civil War. It says the reason for that fighting was clear, though. It was about whether freedom means that some have the liberty to buy and own others, or whether it instead means that all must be free. This war was straightforward, they said. Since then, though, they say we are again our worst enemy, but they say, what are we killing ourselves for? We don't even know. The piece concludes by wondering, is this where the American dream dies? Not on a battlefield, but in our own homes and schools.
Erin Ogunke with today's press review. Thank you very much.